Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. President Trump is doubling down on his calls to reopen schools this fall. At the White House Tuesday, the president met with health officials, educators, and students to discuss how to go back to school safely. The nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says he agrees with getting classrooms up and running again, but also says officials need to adhere to local guidelines. The push comes as coronavirus cases surge across the country. Officials in Florida say they plan to have students back in the classroom next month, but the state is also dealing with a 40% increase in coronavirus-related hospitalizations. Schuyler Henry is at the White House with the latest.
During a roundtable discussion at the White House, the president backed up his calls for students to return to the classroom this fall.
We're very much going to put pressure on governors and everybody else to open the schools. It's very important for our country. It's very important for the well-being of the student and the parents.
But during a remote House committee hearing, the head of the nation's largest teachers union said the race to return lacks the proper plan to keep students and educators safe.
We've got millions now facing overcrowded classrooms, trying to figure out how do you make that work coming back.
The nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, agrees with the president in that students should be back in school. But he says districts will have to get creative with their approach.
The secondary unintended consequences of having children not being able to go to school has ripple effects for the family that might have deleterious effects that really override the so-called safety benefits.
Dr. Fauci also notes the country is still knee-deep in the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic. The CDC has issued preliminary guidance for schools with social distancing and mask-wearing guidelines, but officials emphasize a need for all involved to follow them.
We can get back to school. We can do so safely if we all think smart, if we accept our individual responsibility and our collective responsibility.
As schools and universities finalize fall plans, Florida's top education official is mandating schools open statewide, despite recent spikes in new COVID-19 cases.
Schuyler Henry joins us now. Hi there, Schuyler. Why is the president making a push to reopen schools even as coronavirus cases surge?
Well, hey, Elaine, good evening to you. Well, to use a phrase from Vice President Mike Pence, who was also at today's roundtable, he said to get America open up again, you have to get America's schools open up again. And that, of course, references the economic impact of having these schools back open, meaning that, obviously as parents get jobs and have opportunities to get back to work, they're still going to be thinking about their child, and particularly child care, and that's where these schools can come into play in large part. And then you also have to think about this. We heard from several other education officials who were at this roundtable today, and just the impact on the child in and of itself. Just in terms of what it means to have a child learn on, say, a Zoom call versus being in an actual classroom. And then also you have to think about things like children having the opportunity to get some of their meals from school, something that in certain impoverished communities that is certainly a case. And then also the child's mental health and things like that, and also emotional well-being. And so that, I think, is some of the biggest reasons that we've heard from the president as well. We also heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci, as you saw in the piece, who did not disagree with the president. He said that it is important to get these students back in school, but making sure that they adhere to local guidelines as it pertains to safety, Elaine.
Well, as we heard in your piece, Schuyler, Dr. Fauci said that school districts will have to get creative. So what are some of the steps that health experts and education officials are considering to keep students and teachers safe?
Well, we heard from Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar earlier today. It said that essentially that there needs to be some common sense practices as well, but he didn't get into specifics today. But from what we've been seeing from certain health officials and education officials, that as local municipalities look to get their kids back to school, we've heard from things such as having all of them wear face masks while they are inside of the building. We've heard of the idea of having students eat their school lunches inside of classrooms to stay away from a larger cafeteria, get rid of assemblies, something that's popular in school. And then as far as higher education, we've heard of things like virtual learning altogether. That's something that was a Band-Aid, if you will, to help kids kind of get through the semester. My alma mater, Georgia Southern, sent out a statement earlier today where the university's president said that they are issuing 2 masks per student, as well as making sure that teachers and staff have masks as well as making sure that there is hand sanitizer available almost throughout the entire campus in and of itself. But then we also saw places like Harvard University that said that they are not considering the idea of student on-campus learning at all for the fall semester, something that President Trump referred to as ridiculous, and saying that they are not attempting to be creative in this moment. But Harvard had said that they are already going to just do online learning for this fall semester. Other universities have echoed a similar rhetoric as well. But again, this is kind of what this new normal is going to be. You have some schools who are considering doing a half virtual learning. Well, they'll do half a semester online and then half of it back in school. But I think this is just kind of what this is going to be. But the big point here is, at least according to Dr. Fauci, is that these schools are going to have to pay attention to what their local governments are doing as it pertains to the coronavirus and, of course, the spiking numbers that are happening across the country.
Well, Schuyler, we also learned about some of the recipients of loans from the Paycheck Protection Program. What can you tell us about the list, and why is this significant?
Well, I think some Americans can take comfort, if you want to call it that, in that of the 650,000 or so loans that were given out, most of them did go to small businesses and nonprofits. But I think one of the big things that is starting to come out is we're starting to see some of the businesses that weren't necessarily impacted as much by pandemics as others. For example, we saw construction and manufacturing companies receive these loans as opposed to, say, a struggling restaurant. And that is something of note. We also saw a significant number of people or businesses who made more than $150,000 annually make or receive this loan, I should say. And that includes people like the Girl Scouts, for example, and also Democratic and GOP political groups as well, even Trump donors, one of which owns a chain of Wendy's, Taco Bell's, and Pizza Huts. And so that is interesting as well. Kanye West's Yeezy brand is another one that received these small business loans as well. And so that is going to be something that I think Democrats really start to pay attention to as they are working toward perhaps another round of stimulus, another perhaps paycheck protection program to help these small businesses out, is just to be a little bit more transparent as to where this money is going to make sure that the businesses who really need it get the money they deserve.
And to follow up, Schuyler, the White House is reportedly looking for another stimulus package by the first week of August. Yeah. What might that actually look like, and where do negotiations stand right now?
Well, if we're thinking of Congress, at least from the Democrats' perspective, they've had this ready to go for at least 2 months or so. We're talking about the multi-trillion-dollar HEROES Act that was passed in May there. We haven't heard from the Senate as to what they want to do. But if you think about this, with the spiking number of coronavirus cases happening across the country, that, of course, is going to impact the economy the same way that we saw in the earlier part of this year. And that means that businesses will have to shut their doors again. People may potentially lose the jobs that they just got back again. And so making sure that something passes is extremely important, in particular for the President of the United States, who has a re-election to win. And he has to make sure that something that he's touted all along, this strong economy, is at least ticking or upticking in the right direction. Now, as for when we could possibly see this, the Trump administration says that they want to see something in early August. That remains to be seen. We have heard lawmakers say that they are interested in getting work done on this as well. As for the specifics, though, that remains to be seen.
All right, Schuyler Henry at the White House for us. Schuyler, thank you very much.